I think this work that Gale Pooley and Marion Tupy have created based on William Nordhaus of Yale and Nobel laureate's development of time prices and Nordhaus's demonstration that existing economic data misses almost all innovation. Nordhaus's pioneering article in 1990s showed that the history of lighting, he examined the history of lighting from the fires of cavemen through the light-emitting diode, and he showed that economic data missed almost all of it, a 1,000-fold error in the collections of data addressing innovation. And but Nordhaus believed you had to examine every lighting technology and measure its impact and its advance in order to demonstrate the power of time prices, which are the amount of time a typical worker has to spend to earn the money to buy light in his house. Gale and Marion Tupy have assembled evidence that this error that Nordhaus documents pervades really all GDP data. And economics is not a science of scarcity, it's a science of abundance. And this is the central revolution that is cosmic today, I believe. And it's why I think Gale's contribution is so historic. Our GDP, we still talk about GDP as if it means something when most of government spending is subsidizing worthless stuff. And although it's measured at cost, it's all minus. Well, private sector inventiveness and innovation is fabulously greater than GDP measures at all. So I think we got to get beyond this data trap that is stultifying all of economics. And I think Gale is a great pioneer in this effort. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here again. Thank you, George. Such a great inspiration to me and to all of us, and really such a great light that we've been able to enjoy over these years. The presentation is about, we got it up on the screen. There we go. Okay, let me back up one. So what is the superabundance economy? The superabundance economy is when we find that our standards of living, our personal standards of living are increasing faster than population. The way to think about this is in pizzas. What it means is our individual slices are getting larger. Everybody's slice of this pie is getting larger, and we're also adding more slices to the pie. So the pie gets bigger in 2 dimensions. Each slice gets bigger, and we're adding more pies to it. So how does this happen? How does this happen? It happens when entrepreneurs are free to innovate. So what is an entrepreneur? George would say an entrepreneur is, hang on, here we go. An entrepreneur is, come on. Oop. Okay. An entrepreneur is someone that is visionary, that's willing to take risks in creating something. If that's the definition, who would be the world's most valuable entrepreneur today? I think it's got to be this guy, the MVE. Why would I say that? Well, think about the companies that he has fathered or been a part of creating. And we don't even have the newest one there that he's really rolling on, his new AI company. I think it's XAI. If we think about George's principles and Elon's life and how he has manifested these principles in his actions. Very interesting thing that we observe. What does Elon have to do with George? Well, when we think about George's, let me back up just a second. When we think about these principles, these three principles that George talks about, that wealth is knowledge, growth is learning, and money is time. Money is time. From those, we can derive this theorem that just basically says we can measure the growth of knowledge with time, and we do that with time prices. How do we illustrate this first idea that he has about wealth being knowledge? Well, if you go back to one of the most important economics movies ever produced, it was Infinity Wars. You remember what Thanos said? He said that the universe is finite, its resources finite. If life is left unchecked, life will cease to exist. It must be corrected. Well, he was correct on the first part of that statement. We do live on a planet with a finite number of atoms, but he was wrong about the second part. Resources are not finite. And the way that I like to illustrate this is with a simple quiz. How many keys are on a piano? 88. You get an A, 88. So then the follow-up question, well, if you ask Thanos how many keys are on a piano, what would he say? Thanos would say, come on, Thanos. Thanos would say, you got 88 keys, you must only have 88 songs. Right? Yeah, we understand that he's wrong about that. He's actually wrong because there are no songs in a piano. The songs are in the minds of individual human beings. That's where the songs are, right? The pianos are the atoms. The songs are knowledge. Okay? And what's that number? What is the upper limit on the potential number of songs with 88 keys? It really does approach infinity, doesn't it? It approaches infinity. So we made this mistake in economics. I call it one of our original sins. We defined resources as, come on, clicker. You got to start working. I'm never going to get done here. Okay, we defined resources as atoms, and that was a fundamental error. A fundamental error. In fact, atoms by themselves have no economic value. It's only when we add knowledge to those atoms that they become resources. Knowledge transforms atoms into resources. And since the amount of undiscovered knowledge is really infinite, that suggests that the resources that we're able to have access to are also infinite. In the book, we argue that we live on a planet of infinite bounty. And as we've heard over the last 2 days, we've heard about all of this new knowledge that we're bringing to bear on this world of material that has allowed these materials to become much, much more valuable and at the same time, much more abundant. Much more abundant. So, come on. Should I be pointing this someplace here to make it work better? Okay. Knowledge is unlimited. Therefore, resources can also be infinite. So, we have, where do we see? Okay. I cannot see this. It doesn't show up here. They have got to Macintize this place, man. Okay, here's a quote that Elon's made. He says that the best part of no part is it weighs nothing, it costs nothing, and it can't go wrong. What's he really talking about? He's talking about replacing atoms with knowledge, right? He's talking about replacing atoms with knowledge. Now, how does he do that in his own businesses? Well, okay, I can see that. I just need a mirror. It's behind me? Okay. It's all around me. Okay. So this second principle, we've talked about wealth as knowledge, this second principle. How does Elon understand and apply this principle that growth is learning? Well, if we look at his Look at what he does with all of his companies. He puts them on these exponential growth curves. And why does he do that? Because every time he creates one of these products, he learns something. We've got 7 million Teslas driving around now that are contributing about 100,000 miles a minute of data that he then has to be able to analyze and learn from. These cars, I'm so close to getting those, but I just can't quite get over the the limitation on charging the battery. You got to get it charged in 10 minutes, not 3 hours, and I'll be one of your customers. Okay, there we go. You guys got to hold it down a little more. So we just witnessed this astonishing achievement of human engineering and creativity, and how was that made possible? Well, it was made possible because he's also got these things on learning curves. He also said something interesting. Let me back up. He said, it's science fiction without the fiction. Science fiction without the fiction. Wow, did he really capture what he was dealing with there. There's the growth curve. There's the learning curve that he's put his company on with these rockets. He's like this. We're not going to launch one a year or one a month or one a week. We're going to try to get to launching one of these a day because every time we launch one, we learn something. That learning lets us do what on the next rocket? If you take a look at his, if you zoom in and close to one of his rockets, this is what it says. Instructions, pretty basic. Launch, learn, repeat. Yeah. He's on these learning curves. He understands this principle that George highlights. Growth is learning. He wants to grow, do it this way. So take a look at that first gen and the third gen on these rockets. This is only like a 4-year period too. If you zoom in on the first one and the third one, you notice that there's a difference between the two. What happened to all the parts? Well, let's get rid of the parts we don't need and move the other parts inside. And the reason he was able to do that is we've got 3D printing now, that he's able to print these parts that used to exist on the outside are now on the inside. There you go. Okay. This thing's twice as powerful. Costs less, right? Costs. Look at what he's done to the price, right? Because the obsession isn't what can we technically do. The obsession is what can we do to lower the price. He's lowered the price by a factor of 10. By a factor of 10. And what does that mean when you can do that? Well, one of the side benefits is that 10 years, he's dropped the price by 90%. His goal is he wants to do it another 90%, which means I go from $100 down to $1. I get 100 for the price of one. That's his objective to try to achieve over the next 10 years. Is it possible that he can do that? Well, let's see what happens. One of the great side benefits of SpaceX is Starlink. Starlink's on the same kind of a growth curve. When we look at what's happened there, he was able to start with, okay. Take a look at this chart on what's happening to these launches. And what are those launches, what portion of those launches are actually Elon's launches? Brent Swanson does this nice little chart. Over half the launches are these Starlink. He begins in 2019. He launches 60 of them. Now he's got over 7,000 that he's launched. Once again, what's he doing? Get on a learning curve. I'm going to learn something every time I launch one of these things, and that's going to allow me to lower my costs. I can lower the price. If I lower the price, I can sell more. And if I can sell more, I can make more, and I can get in this virtuous cycle of learning and growing and discovering knowledge and sharing that knowledge. He has an interesting take on patents. George has talked about the entrepreneur as having this altruistic virtue. And what does he say about patents? Now, some of you might disagree with this, but what's he do with this knowledge he discovers? Yeah, here's the knowledge, take it away. I want to share it with everybody else because I think this new knowledge is going to help me to actually grow knowledge as well. Let's not compete, let's collaborate in this pursuit of knowledge. Okay, so I'm going to produce more. Why? Because every time I produce, I get on a learning curve. This learning curve is a lag of this production curve. What does the learning curve yield? The learning curve is going to yield knowledge. What does that knowledge ultimately produce? It produces wealth. This is Elon's thinking, and it's derived from George's thinking. Second idea that he's talked about, he says there's not enough people. Have you heard him talk about this recently? Yeah, not enough people. So he would probably, this is the opposite of what, this is the opposite of what Thanos has said. Opposite of what Thanos has said. And why is he saying this? Why is he concerned about this? Well, his concern really is, and he's made this other statement. He says most countries should view the birth rate as the single biggest problem they need to solve. This declining fertility rate. If you don't make new humans, there is, well, you can read it. Okay? So he has this concern. So when we think about population, typically we have this population pyramid. Girls on the left, boys on the right. You got the young kids that are born, and you've got the old people at top. This is a typical population pyramid for a civilization that's growing. What has happened to some of these places, and what does it look like is going to happen in the future? Well, that pyramid is going to get inverted. It's going to get inverted. It's going to start looking like this. And if you're in some places on the planet where they have kind of messed with the selection of babies, like China, it looks like this. Wow, what kind of problem are you going to have with that? And so he goes on to say, you know, if we do this, we're going to live in a world where there are going to be fewer people, they're going to be older, and they're going to be much, much poorer. Much, much poorer. Is that the future that you want to have? And he clearly sees that that's going to be a challenge and a problem. So part of what he's trying to do is diffuse this depopulation bomb. How do we reverse course on this? How do we get people to understand that part of the reason that we are so rich on this planet is because there's so many of us? Yeah, that was his hat that he made up. He made this at one of his speeches here last week. He says, make babies great again. So it's a very important idea that he's thinking about. It goes back to this idea that if abundance is a function really of population and the freedom to innovate, population and the freedom to innovate. Requires people, but they also have to have this freedom to think, this freedom to innovate. He's really kind of riffing on Einstein when he says this. Einstein made this statement. Come on. Science can flourish only in an atmosphere of free people. So what did Elon do about this? Well, a couple of years ago, he pulls out his checkbook and he writes a check for $44 billion. That's $5.50 for every person on the planet to buy us what? Maybe a little more time to be able to have this freedom to think. And that is what is necessary if we really, truly want to have innovation. Not only did he buy this for us, what did he do that I think is probably just as important? He walks in and he cuts 80% of the employees out. And it seems like it works just as well as it did. Just as well as it did. So, I got an important slide here. When he says he can cut $2 trillion out of the budget, that's 30% of the budget. Anybody else doing that? I say, Musk has been listening to the Argentine guy, the crazy Argentine economist, Javier Milei. That's doing this kind of chainsaw action on the budget. So, is the future really between entrepreneurs or bureaucrats? Why did he move from California to Texas? It's a much more entrepreneurial friendly place. You got bureaucrats versus entrepreneurs, people who are thinking about the future, people versus people who are trying to maintain this status quo. Is it about knowledge creation or knowledge destruction? If we're interested in greater wealth, we've got to be in favor of knowledge creation. It only happens if you have people that are free to think, have ideas, transform those ideas into inventions, and then have markets they can go to where they're able to, man, that's a problem here. I've got two mics here. Does that sound better? Yeah, sorry about that. Where people are free to actually innovate. Are you in, does your policy, is it help this knowledge discovery process, or is it going to prevent it, or worst case, is it going to destroy knowledge that's out there available to us? So, you know, really, we're facing this degrowth is really a war on knowledge. Degrowth is de-knowledge. It's de-knowledge. Thinking about that a little further, he says the world is really between expansionism and extinctionism. What side are we going to choose to be on? George has made this interesting observation in one of his early books. He said that creating a family is the most entrepreneurial thing that you can do in life. And I mean, Elon seems to be in agreement with that principle as well. Entrepreneurship is really about the future. It's about the future. And what does he say about the future? Well, our model says that abundance is a function of population and this freedom to innovate. But take a look at what's happening to population growth rates. Basically, every Western country is below replacement rate. We've got to have every woman's got to have 2.1 children to just maintain population, and we're all way, way below that in most all Western countries. So what we did is we said, is there an empirical way that we can test this idea between economic growth and fertility growth? Is there a relationship between the two? So we looked at 16 advanced countries that were pretty well open to freedom to innovate. So we hold the freedom to innovate constant. We looked at their GDP growth rates and their fertility growth rates. We indexed both of those, and we did these little charts. In those little charts, what we're going to do is this part we're going to once we're ready to publish it, Discoveryal Institute will have all of these slides that you can pull up and look at. So take a look at this first one. Okay. So it's GDP per capita and the growth rate. Well, it's taking off. Oh, you can see Australia there. There's Australia. So what we start with is the blue dotted line is actually the data. And then we do a regression through that data to just get a linear line to see if there's a trend there. We look at the GDP per capita, the growth rate there. That's in the blue. And the red is the fertility growth rate. And then we say, do those two lines have some kind of a relationship between the two? And then what's that ratio? So Australia, I'm just going to try to click through these pretty fast if I can. There's Australia. Who's the next one here? Belgium. Try to go alphabetical. Denmark. We've got... yeah, you start looking at those lines, and what are they all kind of suggesting? It looks like they're both kind of going the same direction together, right? The same direction together. So we get to this point where we say, is there this relationship between this commitment to the future, which is really what family formation is? It's a commitment to the future and entrepreneurship, right? Family and entrepreneurship have this relationship with each other. Somebody that doesn't have kids is not worrying about the future as much as somebody that's got 11. I think he's got 11, right? 12. He's at 12 now? He's hit a dozen. Okay, great. Good for him. All right. So here's the overall world numbers. So we looked at each country, kind of did the analysis there where we had good data, and then we just looked at the overall world numbers of all of them. Look at how tight those two lines are together. So family formation, fertility rate, if you start doing this, your growth rate is going to go right along with it, right along with it. And I'm not an investment advisor, but I would ask you, what country is the most future-oriented country in the world in terms of their family formation. And I think it's our friends in Israel. Take a look at this chart, if you can see that. The terrible one is South Korea. They're down, you got to have 2.1 just to replace, they're at 0.7. So South Korea's got this curve ready to just invert. So there's like, they stopped making South Koreans. And then you've got United States has been pretty flat. We're at 1.6. You know, our population grows because we have immigration. We're not making more babies. We are importing people. So we're still pretty flat. The world is down about 2.3. Got to be 2.1 before we go over the top. But look at what Israel's done. Yeah, they're clear up back at 3. So I wouldn't. Okay, good. I wouldn't, I'm not an investment advisor, but if I had one principle I would use to try to think about where to invest, I would say, back up, hang on, invest in the person who learns the fastest and has the most kids. Or invest in the country that learns the fastest and has the most kids. And I think that puts Israel right back on the map. And Israel's an advanced country, but they've been able to address this depopulation problem with this culture that's really future-oriented, really future-oriented. So thank you very much for your time today.